We all kind of think we know what time is, right? It's this constant thing, a universal clock that just ticks away, the same yesterday as it is today. But what if that's completely wrong? What if the very ruler we use to measure the past is actually part of that past? So let's just jump right in with a question. It sounds pretty simple, but it really changes everything. What if a day wasn't always 24 hours long? And here's the wild part. The science says it hasn't. A day has not always been 24 hours. And that means our yardstick for time isn't set in stone. It has its own history. You see, the measure itself evolves. People get into these huge arguments about how old the Earth is, and everyone argues as if they've got a perfect stopwatch. But what if nobody does? The funny thing is, whether you're looking through a telescope or reading a sacred text, the further back in time you try to go, the fuzzier that clock gets. It almost seems to, well, vanish. Okay, so here's the core of the problem. Every single calendar we've ever had, all of them, are based on two really simple movements. The Earth spinning on its axis, which gives us a day, and the Earth going around the sun, which gives us a year. Super simple. But what if that spin hasn't always been the same speed? And that very question brings us right to the science of it all. It turns out our planet is slowing down. All the evidence from geology, from astronomy, it all points to the same conclusion. The Earth's rotation has been getting slower for billions of years. So why is it slowing down? Well, the biggest reason is something called tidal drag. And it's pretty cool, actually. The moon's gravity pulls on our oceans, right? That's what creates the tides. All that water constantly sloshing back and forth creates friction. It's like the oceans are putting the brakes on the planet, ever so slightly. Now, we're talking a tiny, tiny effect, about 1.7 milliseconds every 100 years. But when you're talking about geological time, yeah, that adds up, big time. So just how much of a difference are we talking about here? Well, let's rewind the clock, way, way back. On the early primordial Earth, a full day might have been just 5 or 6 hours long. Can you even imagine that? The newborn planet was spinning like a top. You'd get a whole sunrise and sunset in the time it takes us just to get to lunch. Okay, now let's jump forward a bit to the age of the dinosaurs. Back then, a day was about 23 hours long. So getting closer to what we know, but still, not quite the same. Which, of course, brings us to our time, our familiar 24-hour day. The key thing to realize here is that our 24 hours isn't some eternal fixed rule. It's just a snapshot. It's just where we happen to be right now on this incredibly long, slowing down curve. Okay, so think about what this really means. If the days are shorter, but the time it takes to go around the sun, the year, is the same, what happens? Well, you just cram more days into 1 year. Back in the Precambrian era, for instance, a year wasn't 365 days. It was more like 400. And this is huge. It means anytime we talk about an ancient year, we're basically trying to compare apples and oranges. We're translating between two clocks that just don't match up. Now, what's really fascinating is that this idea of an unstable, evolving calendar isn't just something we find in the rocks. You can actually find a surprisingly similar story in some of the oldest sacred texts in the world. So if you look at the early biblical texts, the ancient Hebrew word for year, shana, it didn't mean 365 days, not at all. It meant a turning or a cycle. It's a completely different way of thinking. It's less like a digital clock and more like a farmer's almanac. Time was marked by the seasons coming back around, by the harvest, by the life of your animals. It was something you felt and lived, not something you counted with precision. And the Bible actually tells a story about timekeeping. It's pretty amazing when you see it laid out like this. It starts with those vague, natural cycles, the Shana. Then, in the story of the flood, that rhythm is completely shattered. There's chaos. Day and night get all mixed up. The seasons stop. After that chaos, there's a promise to bring back the stable rhythms. And then later, with Moses, time gets formalized into a real lunar calendar. But see, it's not just about getting better at math. It's about linking time to something secret, to worship. The calendar itself becomes a central part of the story. Okay, so what do we do with all this? We have two very different stories about time, one from science, one from scripture. And this is where things get really interesting. Because what if we stop seeing them as being in conflict? What if instead we see it as a translation problem? Like we have two different clocks, both evolving, both trying to measure the same reality. Let's put them side by side.
The scientific model takes things like radioactive decay and translates those measurements into our modern years, our 24-hour day years, to get that 4.5 billion year number. The devotional model, the one that gives us a date like 4004 BC, does something different. It takes a historical record, the genealogies in the Bible, and it just adds up the numbers. Adam lived this many years, then had a son. You add it all up and count backwards. But here's the kicker. They're both doing the same basic thing. They are both models, and they are both translating ancient data into a specific calendar system. And you know what? They have the same kinds of limitations. Neither one is an eyewitness account, right? They both have to translate old events into new units. And they both hit a wall, a horizon they just can't see beyond. The physicist can't directly observe the first split second of the Big Bang, and the historian can't know for sure what kind of year was being used in the very first calendars. They each have their own blind spots.
Recognizing that kind of forces a bit of humility, doesn't it? And it makes you wonder if maybe we've been asking the wrong question all along. If the measurement itself is so unstable, maybe we should stop obsessing over the measurement and start asking about the meaning. What is time actually for?
And here's a really beautiful way to think about that. That slowing down of the Earth's spin, you could almost see it as creation itself, relaxing. The universe is kind of unwinding, going from this super fast, frantic spin in its youth to a much slower, more deliberate, Sabbath-like pace. The lengthening day is a sign of maturation.
And that idea lines up perfectly with what you see in the sacred narrative. The purpose of the Genesis story, for instance, isn't to be a science textbook. Its goal is liturgical, it's moral. It's to show that a period of work culminates in a period of rest. Its concern is what time is for, not a precise calculation of how long it has lasted. So we always start with this question, right? It's the one that kicks off all the arguments. But maybe, just maybe, after looking at all this is the better question. Not one of quantity, but one of purpose. Because when you get right down to it, it doesn't matter if you're reading the story in layers of rock or on ancient scrolls. Both seem to point to the same truth, that time is a servant, not a master. And maybe the fact that it's so variable is a signature, a little reminder that the universe wasn't made to count seconds, but for something far, far greater.